What is up, fellas? The Goob here with another episode of Rewriting History with the Goob. And crazy events. Crazy events. Trump was shot. Pretty much the immediate response was it's fake, it's staged. Let me assure you that this was very real. Trump really did get shot in the head. He is very lucky to be alive. He was almost killed. They tried to kill him. The thumbnail from my YouTube video here is three images in a row. The first one, if you look very closely, and I don't know if there's enough resolution in the thumbnail, but in the original image, you can actually see a streak going through, which is either the bullet or just the blood splatter from his ear, most likely. And then you see his clean hand going up to his ear, touching his ear, and coming away with blood. And this is all before he dropped to the ground. So this was not fake. He didn't palm a razor. All right. And to think that it was an intentional shot to the ear, the guy took his first shot, missed, and then panicked and let off like four more shots in quick succession. And it was like the third shot that actually hit him right after Trump had turned his head. Absolutely 0% chance that this was fake. Trump is very lucky to be alive. But you know me. You know I believe in conspiracy theories, and I think there's definitely some shenanigans going on here. And I will tie all of this to history in a second. I'm just getting out of the way, like the base. Let me dispel the idea that this was in any way fake or staged. However, there is multiple groups of people, not just there's an entire group of people. If you saw the interview with the red-haired guy, which I think he's wearing one of those visors with the fake hair, but he is a redhead. Either way, he was with a whole group of people that were pointing out to the cops that this guy was climbing onto a roof with a rifle, and the cops did nothing. No one tried to shut down the event. No one tried to stop the guy. Nothing happened. There were other entirely separate groups of people who also saw this that were also reporting him to the cops. There's footage from people in the crowd that are recording the guy from the ground on the roof. He's in plain sight. There's people seeing this, calling out to the cops. Nothing was done. The snipers that were on the roof, the Secret Service snipers, appear to have spotted this guy about the time when the first people spotted this guy, and they had their rifles trained on him, and they didn't shoot until after he started shooting. There's a lot of fishiness going on here. Could this have been an inside job? Yeah, it seems very, very suspicious, but I don't think Trump was involved in this. I don't think it's ridiculous to think that it was an intentional earshot with the way this played out. The guy missed his first shot and then panicked, and one of his shots happened to hit him in the ear right after he turned his head. To think that's deliberate, you're giving way too much credit to people. They're not perfect. You can't operate to that level of precision. It's insane. So this was absolutely a real attempt on his life. Donald Trump, I do not think, was involved in this. But it seems that there were people involved in this in one way or another, other than just the shooter. I mean, to just describe this to negligence is tough, especially when you have so many different people just in the crowd that are spotting this guy and shouting him out, and nothing is done. So how does this relate to history? How does this relate to this whole conspiracy? If you paid attention to the news at all after this happened, I mean, the narrative spinning was absolutely wild. They refused to acknowledge that this was an assassination attempt. And now they are actually actively blaming Trump and the right wing for the attempt on Trump. They are sitting there saying that it's the right wing's extreme, rhetoric towards violence that has instigated this. Meanwhile, they are instigating more violence towards the right wing with their rhetoric as they're saying this, as they're blaming the right wing. It's absolutely insane. And I assume that most of you, all of you, see it for what it is, for the fact that it's absolutely insane. And the questions I have to ask you are, do you think these people, all of these people in the media, are directly being controlled? Do you think there are shadow puppets puppeteering these people? They have blackmail on them, or they have whatever, or even just going up to them nicely and saying, hey, will you present it this way? Do you think these people are directly being controlled? Or do you think they know what the narrative is supposed to be and they follow along like the good little goys that they are? Personally, I think it's the latter. I don't think, and not that there is never any control, any direct control. I'm sure it happens. I know it happens. The CIA admits they're in control of the media. But the majority of these people, they don't need any direct control to go along with this absolutely insane narrative. All the lefties that would have been cheering if Trump were killed, they're not being directly controlled. They're being influenced by the narrative. All the people on the right, what was the response to Trump almost getting assassinated? Most of them, it seems, or a large portion of them, also seem to think this was fake and staged. But ultimately, the response is absolutely nothing. The right has done absolutely nothing in response. And if Trump was killed, do you think anything would have happened? I don't really think it would have. There's not even a hint of a response from the right now. I don't think, where is the line that has to be crossed for the right to start, engaging in the warfare that's being engaged upon them? And I don't think that line exists. We watched it get trampled with COVID. We just watched them try and kill Trump. If they had succeeded, I still don't think anyone would do anything. And why is that? It's because of the narrative is so unbelievably powerful. You're put in a position where you're defending against insanity rather than even fighting back to actually defend yourself against the very real attacks that are happening. You're not even at that point. You're defending yourself against the insanity that is, Trump is to blame for his own assassination attempt. The right wing is to blame for all of this violence from the left, right? And if you think this isn't affecting you, and to connect this back to history, look at the Flint Dibble and Graham Hancock debate. All of these people who had decades of passion going into, alternate history in Atlantis, as soon as that Flint Dibble and Graham Hancock debate came out, the entire conversation, the entire narrative shifted away from the architecture and the stories and the myths to grain and agriculture. I was obsessively following this to an unhealthy degree. I was watching all of the videos that were talking about it, reading all of the comments. I mean, I was going way too deep into all of this after the Flint Dibble Graham Hancock debate. And the entire conversation, 80+% of the conversation immediately shifted to grain and agriculture, something that had never been talked about, never been part of the topic up until that moment in time. These people who genuinely care about Atlantis, who are passionate about it, who have invested years of their lives of passion into this and have always been impassioned by the architecture, completely abandoned all of that passion, completely abandoned that entire history, and they started arguing about agriculture and the grain. Controlling the narrative is an incredibly powerful force. It is the most powerful force on humanity. And I know some of you are tired of me talking about the narrative. I know you think I'm, whatever you think, right? But hopefully I'm making this point effectively. Right? They completely changed the conversation away from architecture to grain, and it has started to shift back now. They didn't keep that pressure on, right? But that is insane that all of those people just immediately abandoned all of their passion collectively and started arguing over grain and agriculture. And you see no response from the right. People are now, it's just, people's brains are so cooked by all of the bullshit. So, yeah. Let me read some chat, see what you guys, I've got it on live chat. There we go. Yeah, it would have, the fist pump in the air was pretty epic. But him going to UFC last night would have been magical. That would have been awesome. I don't even know the exact time it happened, but yeah, he got shot, man. Oh, I can't use my scroll wheel on this. All right, can I scroll it all? What's going on here? My chat is stuck. There we go. Okay, we're back. Maybe. There we go. Sorry, fellas. Lots of memes. Yeah, I mean, you can find the images, you can find the video, and you can play it, but like you can find the images that are on. I used as my thumbnail. It shows him before getting shot. It shows him lifting up his hand, which was clean. It shows him touching his ear, which comes away with blood. This is all before he drops down to the ground. It's absolutely real. The people behind him got shot and died. I mean, it's absolutely 100% real, and it's really sad to see the state of the world and just how cooked everyone's brains are. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you, Mr. Slav. That whole situation is absolutely bullshit. I don't think it's purely, incompetence at all. Um, this is now to what degree of involvement this was. Were they aware of someone's plot and they allowed it to happen? Did they help facilitate the plot? Was this directly orchestrated by them? There's varying degrees of what could have happened, but it's just such bullshit. It seems pretty obvious that there were insiders involved in this to some one way or another. Yeah, the it's the right too, though. A lot of people on the right are calling it fake too. No, I mean it was, yeah, it wasn't the first shot. It was like the second or third or fourth, something like that. But I think the shooter fired 5 shots, and then there were like 2 return shots that got the shooter. Yeah, I mean someone needs to take the fall for this. Absolutely. I probably won't be the people that are actually responsible, but you know, I don't know the exact time. Yeah, I mean, you have Trump Jr. that said that he didn't want the Secret Service. He would reject the Secret Service and get his own private security because he didn't trust them because he thought they would kill him or allow him to be killed. He was crazy, right? You have Tucker and all of these other people that are saying they're gonna try and kill Trump. Like all of this rhetoric is pointing towards that, which it very clearly was. All of the rhetoric from the media and the politicians and everyone else and all the rhetoric online. I mean, they've actively and openly been calling for his death. They've been calling him a dictator and Hitler and saying we need to take him out with any means necessary. We need to put him in the crosshairs. All of this rhetoric, it absolutely led to this. I'm talking about the power of the narrative, right? No one on the right is taking any action whatsoever, and they won't, no matter what happens, until there is a shift in the narrative. And I've talked a little bit about how there's beginning to see this shift in the narrative in the history world, in the archaeology world, in the science world in general, but especially with archaeology, where it's going beyond just people recognizing that it's ridiculous, right? Because everyone on the right recognizes the ridiculousness of the narrative, but they're still not doing anything about it. They're still submissive to the narrative. In archaeology, there is starting to become this shift where people are not only saying this is ridiculous, but they're actually setting out and establishing their own narrative. They're establishing their own new groups. They're establishing, and I know that's difficult to do politically because the government Ruby Ridges you real quick, or Gretchen Whitmer kidnap plots you real quick, or whatever, right? But it does, I guess, give me some hope politically because you are starting to see this shift take place in science and archaeology, and but it absolutely takes a shift in the narrative for anything to happen. Nothing's going to happen until that narrative has some type of real shift, and it just keeps shifting further and further to the left currently. So maybe this can be some kind of catalyst, but it hasn't been. The GoFundMe for what? Does Trump have a GoFundMe for getting shot? I'm not aware of it, but 2.5 million isn't even that much, frankly, if that's what that is. Yeah, it very obviously was an assassination attempt and a genuine one. That's 0% chance, in my opinion, that this was not a genuine attempt on Trump's life. I think it's essentially a 0% chance that Trump had any knowledge of this or was involved in any way. And absolutely 0% chance that it was a deliberate earshot. That's insanity. Yeah, and they were saying he fell. They were saying, I don't know if you saw the whole glass thing, but there's this thing being pushed about he wasn't shot. It was glass from a projector that cut him. And they were like, oh, look, it's all debunked. He wasn't assassinated. They didn't try and assassinate him. He got cut by some glass. You're all overreacting. It's just all so insane. It's all so insane. And everyone knows it's insane, but we're still under its power. We're still under the power of that insanity. And we reject it to the point that we know it's crazy and we don't accept it, but we aren't truly rejecting it. If we are not reacting appropriately to the situation that is unfolding around us. We haven't been for years. You look at COVID, which I'll transition to that real quick, right? Because this idea of it's too big is a really common trope for conspiracy theories. Flat Earth, it couldn't be flat. That's way too big of a conspiracy. Too many people would have to be involved, right? And after COVID, that's absolutely plainly clear as day bullshit. The entire world walked in lockstep during COVID. None of it made sense. None of it was beneficial, but everyone did the exact same thing. There were 3 countries that rejected the vaccines. All 3 of them very quickly had new leaders. One of them was straight up assassinated. The other 2, I believe, also died. One from a heart attack and the other maybe an accident or something, right? And literally day 1 of the new leadership, vaccines were accepted. So, it's too big. We all watched that. COVID, the entire world paid attention and watched it all go down, and it all went down. They can do whatever the fuck they want as long as they control the narrative. It's the most powerful force in the world when it comes to humanity. Okay? So the idea that they are covering up all of history, that they are massively hiding history on a global scale, it's not too big of a conspiracy. It's exactly what is happening. And I'm going to be going into that a bit further. I've got some videos linked down below that are relevant to this. There is a global conspiracy to cover up history. It is a powerful conspiracy. And I'm also going to try and establish, a new narrative. So let me finish reading through this chat first, though. I know Jiminy Glick. I don't know Caroline Glick. Are they related? Yeah, dude, if you haven't realized it by now, nothing will ever make you realize it. The last, it's been ramping up steadily in bullshit for a very long time now. I recognized it in middle school. I recognized it like very early 2000s. Okay, so it's been bullshit for a long time. But if you haven't figured it out over the last 5 years, I don't think there's any hope for you. We've reached what I keep assuming has to be peak levels of clown world and bullshit, and then it just keeps going higher. So, yeah, great, man. What did that accomplish? What did it take for the left to go out and destroy entire fucking cities? It took a drug dealer overdosing. Our president almost just got assassinated, and there was a rally in front of a Trump building. Oh, my chat just jumped. Where was I? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, this isn't a Zapruder situation. We have more and more coming out, and it's becoming more and more evident that you really can't ascribe this to incompetence. You have groups and crowds of people shouting, "Guy on the roof with a gun," and no one does anything. No one removed Trump. They just let him get shot. The snipers that were working for the Secret Service pointing, looking straight at him. And there have been reports, I have no idea of their validity. They could be totally bullshit. But there have been reports that, like, yeah, they had him. They were asking for permission to shoot, and they were being told to stand down. Even after he shot, they were being told to stand down, but they shot anyways. Like, I have no idea if there's any validity to that. But it does seem like they had him in his sights. They had him in their sights, and they didn't shoot until after he shot. It's all kinds of bullshit. And yeah, it's going to be plain to see that for those who choose to, because a lot of people are, I mean, there's still people who believe that Trump said they're very fine people on both sides and was praising Nazis. And he literally said the exact opposite multiple times in that speech. So, it's going to be whatever people choose to believe. People are going to choose, even if they watch it, they'll still say AI. They'll still just choose to be ignorant. We're living in a world where everyone's brains are so cooked. I've talked about how separated from reality we are, and people have picked issue with the word reality. They go, you mean the production line? And like, yes, we're separated from that too, but I mean it much more broadly. I mean, we are entirely detached from reality, and this makes it so plainly evident. There's people that you can show them the video. They can be fully aware that Trump was shot, and like, this is a thing that happened. And they'll go, yeah, it was AI. It didn't actually happen. Like, people's brains are so cooked. We are so separated from reality that it's hard to even encapsulate. So, yeah. And I think I'm gonna get into this. This is gonna be a really long episode. But like, I think that's what this greater ability that you see in the past, the 91% survival rate of trepanning, it's not because they had Star Wars, technology. It's because they were actually connected to reality. They were connected to the world around them. They had an understanding of the world around them. They didn't reject the world around them. They accepted it and they understood it and they worked with it. And I think that's why we see these incredibly impressive things in the ancient past, and why we are so fucked in the present. Hey, you can think whatever you want, Dylan the guy, but you better have like some kind of explanation, because I've laid out the reasons why I think it wasn't fake, and I think those reasons are rock solid. So if you're gonna disagree, feel free to call in and disagree, but like, give some reasons why beyond, oh, he posed for a picture, he wanted to look good. Trump is a reality TV star and a WWE star. I think that fits perfectly with Trump, and that was bad ass. So why you think Trump would miss an opportunity like that to be that badass? Not a chance. Yeah. Of course I drink from a mason jar. I have cups, but this is what I drink from every day. Are you guys trying to do numbers bullshit, gematria shit, and everything with the time? I don't get involved in that. You're free to look into it. I won't discourage you, but I just don't participate in it. And maybe I'll check that out later. All right, so back to all the things that I was talking about. Where did I want to go to next? I guess the idea of high technology, right? Because I expressed last week that I dislike it, but I never really cleared up what it means, and that's because there is no definition for it. There is no is high technology higher technology than what has been ascribed to these ancient people? Is high technology our technology? Is high technology beyond our technology? Is high technology a completely different avenue? There's no one knows what it is. It can mean anything. So I'm just going to say that these people very clearly had a higher degree of technology and understanding than historians have given them credit for, and to some extent was beyond what we are doing now. Again, with the trepanned skulls, they're achieving in multiple different parts of the world, in multiple different time periods. They are achieving a higher level of survival than we are today, performing the exact same emergency brain surgery for someone who's received blunt force head trauma and has a fractured skull and brain swelling. They were performing it more successfully in multiple different parts of the world, multiple continents, multiple time periods. So did they have modern technology? Did they have modern medical techniques? I don't think they did. And I don't think they had any high-tech sci-fi thing even beyond that either. I mean, I've talked about the golden syringe from Greece. So that's modern technology. We used syringes like that until like the last few decades for cataract surgery. So it's like this all gets so muddied when you're talking about this terminology, like what, and trying to define it. It's also anomalous, and I really hate that aspect of it. So I think that these people very likely were not traveling the same route that we are technologically. They had things like the Antikythera mechanism, right? So they did understand simple machines that, I'm sure different groups of people developed simple machines many different times throughout history. But, were they using hydraulic machines and electronics like we are today? I don't think they were. But look at the construction that was happening in the 1800s. Look at the Philadelphia courthouse, which is still standing today, which has 18-foot or like 22-foot thick walls today of stone, right? And that was done without modern machinery. That was done with simple machines. So, if that's the technology they were working with in the ancient past, that's well beyond what's been ascribed to them, but it's also entirely possible, and it's not electronics or sci-fi or anything magical or mystical. But I also think that they very likely were going down entirely different avenues that we just aren't exploring today. I don't know how else you explain things like the trepanning or, some of the links I have down below with the Russian guy or whatever he is talking about his experiments with natron. Okay, so he's arguing that the scoop marks, especially and specifically the scoop marks you see in Egypt on the unfinished obelisk, which are completely failed to be explained through mainstream archaeology's attempts to explain them. They say they were made by dolerite pounding stones, but these scoop marks go up underneath the bottom side of this obelisk, and they go into, at an angle, the bottom of this obelisk that's too sharp to be explained by a pounding stone, not to mention, the gravity issues. It doesn't add up. So he's attempting to explain this through the usage of natron and burning natron on top of the granite, which then melts certain stones within the granite and allows the other stones to just be brushed aside. And then potentially recovering that portion of the granite and recasting that into then fake granite. So he's doing all of this, and I don't know if it's genuinely the explanation. It could be part of an explanation, right, for some of the things we see. It could not be, but this is the type of practical archaeology that needs to be done in order to figure these things out, because I don't think they're explainable. We haven't explained them through our modern methods. We haven't explained them through archaeology's explanations. Those are all bullshit. If you look at, when I was talking about Ramses II and all of the beautiful stonework that he's done, I established that it is possible to do this stuff with copper. Theoretically, it is possible. Okay? But I was still hesitant to accept that all of this was done with copper. It just seems like too much. And when you look at the methods that are proposed by these serious archaeologists, like the diorite pounding stones, and you do the math, you do the experimental archaeology to test how much stone you can remove with this, and then you calculate how many people it would take, how long it would take, almost 100% of the time, the math never works. These things would take hundreds of years, and they're supposed to be done in like 15, right? This applies to the Great Pyramid. This applies to Mount Kailash Temple. This applies to the unfinished obelisk. This applies to damn near everything in the ancient megalithic past. And so, so clearly there is something being missed. There's something being missed, and alternate historians like to say what's being missed is this super ancient civilization, 12,000 plus years old, and all of this stuff was inherited. I strongly disagree with that. I have absolutely no problem with the idea of a civilization 12 plus thousand years ago. Humans have been around for 300,000 years at a minimum, quite possibly longer. Your skeletons don't last all that long. Finding a million-year-old human, even if we were around back then, is damn near impossible. So we've been around at least 300,000 years. I think we've likely done a lot of impressive things in that time and been reset several times. Okay, so I have no surprise whatsoever if Atlantis and a whole bunch of other stuff was real. But I don't see the evidence for it. I don't see the evidence for inheritance. I see evidence excluding inheritance, right? So I demonstrated with Ramses that he was perfectly capable of producing his statues, that there are statues that are some of his most impressive ones where it would have been impossible to add his cartouche later. It had to be contemporary with the statue, and if he can produce that, why couldn't he produce everything else, right? So there's the Mount Kailasa Temple, which has the Mahabharata carved into it. It is the Mahabharata. The temple itself is the Mahabharata, so it couldn't have been added later, right? And I did look into this more. Long story short, because it's a very complicated answer actually, but long story short, yeah, this temple could not possibly be older than roughly 1,500, maybe 2,000 years old. Just going off of the proof that it has the Mahabharata on it. Mainstream archaeology, I believe, says it's 1,300 years old. In my opinion, this is the most impressive structure, ancient structure, that is still intact today, is the Mount Kailash Temple, the Mount Kailasa Temple, however you say it. And it's one of the most recent as well. It's 1,300 years old, or at least no older than 1,500, 2,000 years old, right? Due to the Mahabharata being carved into it. So we see with the vases, 5,000+ years old, this incredible stonework. We see with the Great Pyramid, 4,500 years old. We see with Ramses, I think 3,200 years old, something roughly around there. Again, incredible stonework. We see the Barabar caves, which I think they were saying are 2,500 years old, according to the inscriptions, but potentially older is what they kept hinting at in the video. And then we see all of the impressive architecture that happens in between in Indonesia and India, all the way up to the Mount Kailasa Temple 1,300 years ago. So just like with the trepanning, in the stonework, we see this incredible stonework popping up in various parts of the world. You have the Olmecs in South America, right? And at various time periods in the world. So it was lost repeatedly just within the last several thousand years, and it's been lost again to us now today. And on the Barabar caves and the writings on them real quick. So I pointed this out in my early videos on Egypt. It's very, 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 very common to see these wild discrepancies in quality on the same pieces in the ancient past. And it doesn't make sense at first glance. But you see a lot of wild discrepancies today in present times. Look at the Amazon tribe just got smartphones and internet, right? But they're still a primitive tribe, literal spear chuckers, that's a wild incongruence right there, right? So you see some very strange things today, and you see strange things in the past. And I demonstrated with the Ramses statue, how the writing was obviously contemporary with the rest of the statue, and also the detail work. Something very commonly you see in these ancient Egyptian statues is you see these flawless, perfectly polished, perfectly shaped, just absolutely exquisite, flawless statues. And then on them, you see not only writing, but detail work, like the jewelry, the necklaces, the cufflinks, things like that, that are added on hand chiseled and are not this flawless, polished nature. And, you know, there's lines in the polished stuff that are absolutely straight and perfect and evenly spaced. And then you get these hand chiseled detail works, which look like garbage very consistently across all of these statues. So, you know, and I demonstrated how some of this had to be contemporary on some of these statues. On a lot of these statues, theoretically, it could have been added later, but why would you? Why would you take this beautiful statue and then add this crude necklace on top of it? Why would you do that in the contemporary time either? I don't know. There's strange, not everything just obviously makes perfect sense as soon as you look at it. People do weird things. The world is a weird place, right? So the Barabar caves, the writing not matching the precision of the caves, to me is not at all evidence that they are older. I'm open to the idea that they're older, but this is a very common thing you see in the past, and it seems to genuinely be a thing you see in the past. It doesn't seem to be evidence of inheritance. Not that it never is, but there's a lot of examples of that wild discrepancy without it being inheritance. So let me talk a little bit more about the Barabar caves and why they're so impressive. I assume that you guys had a chance to watch the video by now. So hopefully you guys have watched the video. I'm going to have to relaunch this meeting too. I'm going to read through chat and then relaunch the meeting and go into the Barabar caves. Yeah, I wasn't accusing anyone, but I noticed people kept asking for the time, and it occurred to me maybe that's why. Yeah, it auto censors a lot of things. One of the things it auto censors, you're not allowed to. One of the most banned websites on the internet, besides Alex Jones's websites, is Stolen History, I think .org or .net, whatever. Stolen History, it will not show up on Google or most other search engines. It cannot be shared on Facebook or I believe even Twitter. Maybe someone can test that for me. I know it can't be shared on any of the alphabet sites. So yeah, people talking about alternate history on a forum online is one of the most banned websites there is. It's been taken down several times. And if you Google Stolen History, all you get very deliberately, all of the results on the first page are old results talking about times when Stolen History has been taken down to give the impression that the website no longer exists. And of course, they don't show it in their search results. So yeah, there's very blatant, obvious conspiracy going on to cover up history. And I can't remember if I went into all of that. Did I go into all of the details of Gunung Padang? I don't think I did. So I'll have to go into that. But yeah, it's massive global conspiracy to hide history. America is consuming itself. It's really, really sad. Yeah, interesting. I did see that in the chat. I am able to see that, which is interesting because I know I've tried to include it in like the descriptions of the video, and it won't let me. I know it's banned from Facebook. You can't share it on Facebook and stuff. And like I was saying, the search engines. So let me get this set back up. And I don't know. I guess I'll continue with Barabar, and then at some point I should go into the whole conspiracy details. I can't remember. Someone in chat tell me if I went over like Gunung Padang and the government initially being gung-ho for it and then people stepping in. I'm pretty confident I did not go into all of that. So I'll have to do that. I'll have to do that at some point. Let me pull up the link in case anyone wants to join on a call and call in. You guys are welcome to. I need to do a lot of stuff here. There we go. Sorry, my computer's slow. Bear with me, fellas. I will be getting back into it in just a minute. I've got, man, this episode is a lot of trying to connect a whole lot of seemingly disconnected ideas. I feel like I've done a decent job so far. Hopefully I can keep it up. Where's the chat at? I will be getting back into it in just a minute. What is going on? I've got, man, this... Oh, son of a bitch. All right. I'm struggling here, fellas. I guess if anyone wants to call in, let me know, and I will work on getting you the link. But my computer's struggling. I'm struggling. I'm going to move on, and just let me know if you want to call in and chat. So, all right. Barabar Caves. Now, I'm going to talk about Gunung Padang, this global conspiracy to cover up history, right? So, I've covered a lot of things already. I've covered Nagpra, which in the 90s and earlier, you have all of these people talking about giant skeletons. You have all of these accusations of the Smithsonian covering them up. And then you have the United States government coming in and making a law going, don't worry about the giant skeletons. Don't worry about any of the skeletons because you're not allowed to see them. You're not allowed to know anything about them whatsoever anymore. You're never going to hear about any skeletons anymore, so just don't even worry about it. Then the most recent Nagpra laws, people are getting more and more interested in history. People are recognizing the bullshit of the current narrative. They're going, hey, none of this stuff adds up, and they're looking into it, and the government goes, hey, don't worry about that stuff because now it's all illegal. You're not allowed to know about any of it. Anything that isn't post-Columbus white people, you are forbidden for knowing anything about American history. So, I mean, these are powerful forces taking powerful actions. You have I think it was off the coast of Brazil, that shipwreck that they immediately made searching for shipwrecks illegal. They covered it up. They dredged the coast to cover it up and wouldn't allow people to recover that ship or look for any other future ships because it was a Roman shipwreck, right? I've covered the Göbekli Tepe scandal that recently has gone down. And now you have Bright Insight also sharing, Jimmy Corsetti, sharing light on the Gunung Padang thing, which is something that I've been following for like a decade. I caught wind of this back when the dude first started talking about it. And back then, the government, is it Indonesia? The Indonesian government was fully gung-ho on Gunung Padang. They were normal people who were not being directly controlled. So I made all of this point earlier about how all of these people are so effectively controlled by the narrative without any direct intervention. But here is an example of very direct intervention, okay? The government was fully pumped and psyched. They thought it was totally sick and rad even, that Gunung Padang might be one of the oldest and craziest sites in the entire world right there in their little country of Indonesia. And they wanted it explored. They said, you have the full backing of the government. You have the full funding of the government. Look into this, find what you can, and explore this. Because why wouldn't you have that reaction, okay? But then the WEF and the powers that be stepped in and they said, hey, little fella there, little leader of a country, little Mr. Indonesian man in charge, we're going to need you to do a 180 and shut this the fuck down. You are not going to be looking into this whatsoever, and no research will be done. And that's exactly what happened. And Jimmy over on Bright Insight talks about this. He goes into more detail about this, and he exposes some of the actual specific players. And I strongly encourage you to check out that video. I linked down below again the Formscapes video that is called When Science Became Unscientific. And he's dropping all kinds of truth bombs about the Epsteins and everything else, and how, you know, this whole peer review process is completely corrupt and just doesn't work. I sort of recommended the last 40 minutes of the Terrence Howard and Eric Weinstein debate or conversation, where Weinstein also just absolutely shits on the scientific establishment. He also talks about how Epstein and his wife or girlfriend, whoever she was, Ghislaine Maxwell, both of their parents are deeply involved in this corruption of science. How he gives personal experiences and firsthand accounts that he witnessed from other people. I guess that's secondhand. You know, and just absolutely shits on science. There's a lot, right? It's the point I'm getting at here is it is a massive global conspiracy. You have like the AAA, the American Archaeological Association, which is Flint Dibble and all of his cronies. And I wouldn't be surprised either way if they were directly being controlled, some of them, or if it was purely, you know, this reaction to the destruction of all of the natural modes of competition in human life, in modern life. And so now they're just gleefully playing this sick, twisted game of tearing down other people because they can, and it elevates their status internally within themselves, and in a sick way gives them pleasure and validation. So, you know, it could be either, but both are going on. Both are very strongly going on. You have these direct influences. You have these world governments stepping in and shutting things down. And you have, you know, the narrative, which is just incredibly, incredibly powerful. Shifting back again to the Bear Bar Caves. Shifting back again to the Bear. MySpace was badass, man. MySpace was like before it was. MySpace was magic, man. MySpace was magic. So. That would be kind of funny. It makes a comeback. Yeah, we're bringing Rad back. It's even worse than that, Mr. Galunas. It's even worse than that. Are you saying, do you think there's any local people that would violate that bill? Doubtful. That's a suicide move with, again, the narrative. That's so racist, that's so white supremacist, that's so oppressive. No way, man. No way. I really don't think that, not intentionally, not deliberately, not like that. All right. So the Bear Bar Caves, right? Why do the Bear Bar Caves matter? I hope you guys did watch the video. I said it was an absolute must watch. Maybe my strongest endorsement yet. Or at least up there, top 3, right? It's a complicated topic. There's a lot of angles here, pun intended. So that's where I'll start, is the angles. The Bear Bar Caves would be impressive if they were geometric shapes. If you had squares and rectangles and circles and they were perfectly geometrical, they would be very impressive. But they're not. They are not geometric shapes at all. They have strange angles, 88.5 degrees, 85.5 degrees, but very specific, very deliberate, very consistent. They match on both sides. They're the exact same. And And even the arches, some of them are spherical arches or follow, a natural radian arc. Some of these are like parabolic arcs. There's caves where they come up at 85 degrees, and then the arc gradually transitions. It's not a hard half circle. It's this parabolic transition, and all of this does make creating these caves a lot more complicated. I mean, going from a 90-degree angle to this specific 88.5 or whatever, because it changes depending on the wall. The walls always match across from each other. They always match. The parallel walls match. But, these walls might be different. And then in each cave, that setup is different. So adjusting that angle makes this significantly more complicated. And then having this parabolic arch again makes it significantly more complicated. And this is multiplied many times over by the fact that these are nearly perfectly symmetrical shapes. So they're not geometric shapes, but they are perfectly symmetrical shapes. And I mean, that's obviously a product of the method of construction, but also the method of construction was likely a deliberate creation specifically for this, if that makes sense. But yeah, getting within 2.5 millimeters, perfectly parallel is a ridiculous achievement. And, they had a lot of interviews from people who are stonemasons and work in construction saying how impossible this would be, right? And take all of that with a grain of salt. I don't know who these guys specifically were. I could go to a job site and ask a bunch of construction workers how they built the Great Pyramids or any other question, and they'd all go, I don't know, and like, how would we do it today? I don't know. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, finding a bunch of people that work in construction to say they don't know how this was done. But one of the interesting things that was said was that one of the people were like, if we were to build this out of blocks, like if we were to cut blocks and then construct this shape as a building, we could absolutely get within these tolerances. We could probably even do it a lot better than they did it, right? But to do this the way they did it, where you're excavating out a cave, you're doing it all internally, all with one solid piece, it's like that would be almost impossible. And I'm firmly of the opinion that we could do it today, but it would be a monumental task today. Like, you're gathering up the best of the best around the world and coming up with some real innovative, groundbreaking solutions to do this kind of deal, right? So these caves are very impressive. But back to the angles, all right? And back to the symmetry and everything else. These caves had mathematical ratios encoded into them that were distilled down to their most basic essence, if you will, right? Like, they were the most simplistic, straightforward ratios that you could possibly put in there. So there's no debate that they're accidental. There's no trickery going on with the numbers. Like, it's very highly debated whether the encoding in the Great Pyramid is legitimate or if it's just number magic, because you can find all of those same numbers doing number magic on a toothbrush, right? That's the famous example. And there's truth in that, right? The Barabar caves are very clearly not an example of number magic. These are clearly encoded, information sets. You have, like, okay, this cave is a rectangle made of two squares. So the base length of one of those squares, that's 1. And then you add up the perimeter, and you have a perimeter of, whatever. Like, the ratios were all distilled down to, like, their most basic elements of, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 kind of deal. You know what I'm saying? And they were all all very, very clear and accurate. And this becomes very difficult when you start accounting for volume and you're not using these geometric shapes. You're using these odd angles and you're using these curves that aren't even circular. So you're counting the volume and getting it absolutely accurate to, equal 300 of that one base unit that is, the base of the square, right, to establish these ratios. That's not accidental, and it's incredibly impressive. That's like calculus level math that's going into this, and the planning and execution to actually execute it with that precision is, again, unbelievably impressive. And I know someone was pointing out how imperfect these Barabar caves are. When you watch the light go over the polished surfaces, you can see it ripple, right there. It's not absolutely perfect, which to me does offer some indication that this was not done with super advanced high-tech machinery, right? If we were to put our modern polishing equipment in there today, we could get it smoother looking. We could absolutely get it smoother looking. Could we fall within the same level of precision? Maybe not. Maybe. But we could get it more impressive looking. We could get it more perfect looking, if that makes sense. That would be easy for us, relatively speaking, right? But it has these imperfections. So they somehow executed this seemingly without this modern machinery, high technology, right? While doing so in like the most difficult possible way and with the utmost precision. I don't think this is explained by copper chisels. Okay, there's something else going on here. There's something that isn't copper chisels and that isn't massive hydraulic, electric machines that is going on here. And I've got some evidence for that. I talked a little bit about the videos down below with the guy with the not naphtha, but natron, right, explaining the scoop marks and potentially even explaining synthetic granite. There's another video linked down below where this guy is looking at different megaliths in Peru. I don't agree with everything this guy is saying in the video, but he makes a lot of very interesting points and he shows a lot of very interesting things that aren't necessarily the most popular tourist destination. So you might see some new things that you haven't seen in Peru before if you check out his videos. But he's showing some very interesting features on these rocks that seem to be displaying various different techniques that were used to shape and process these rocks. One of the things he shows is that there's obsidian all over the surface of a lot of this granite in Peru. And there is on Jesus Christ, it's not even on the tip of my tongue, but the big one, the main Machu Picchu, there it is. I think there's some vitrified rock there where it's like, it looks like a fire was burnt and the rocks are heavily damaged on the front. They're blackened, right? There's that type of vitrification, right? But this is very, very different. There's also the mysterious vitrification, which you see like across Egypt and I think also a bit in Peru and other various parts of the world, but where it looks like maybe it was a lightning strike, but sometimes it looks even more than that. Like maybe it was this plasma burst from the sun or something else, who knows, right? This is none of that. This is just a very, very, very surface level vitrification of the stone into obsidian, where it's almost like they're taking a hot iron, and just like ironing over the top. So they're like rough chiseling it, right? It's got a bit of a rough surface, and then they're just passing over it with like a hot iron to melt down those rough top parts and just bring it flat and level, is almost what it seems like. And he's demonstrating this on a lot of different rocks in different locations down there. I don't know how to explain that. It's not explainable by an external fire. You wouldn't get that type of result. It would be very, very different looking. It would be much deeper into the surface and just like, it just wouldn't be like that at all. He talks about a limestone rock, not granite, that also has this vitrified obsidian-looking surface on it, this melted-looking surface. And he references a study by John Peter and Zedong that they sent a sample to Utrecht University in Sweden or somewhere over there. I couldn't find any direct reference to this. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, doesn't mean it's not real, but I tried searching for this and I couldn't find anything. But the claims he makes are extraordinary, so I would love to find it if it's out there. Because he says that the stone that's melted on the surface of the sandstone rock is a different makeup than the sandstone itself. It has like more silica and more other things in it. And he also shows areas where the stone had been etched by acid very clearly, and just these different techniques, and he ascribes different methods that they were accomplishing these different things. And I think he's right. Whether he's right about the specifics, I don't know, but I don't think there's one answer to all of this stuff, right? And obviously there can't be, to some extent, right? Like the answer to how they're shaping these rocks, forming these rocks, I tried to say both of those words together, how they're doing that obviously doesn't answer how they're performing brain surgery more effectively than we are today, right? So like there's different stuff going on here, and I think there's a lot of different stuff, and I think it's, if we're looking for things within our own avenue of technology, we're probably not going to find them. We're looking in the wrong area. We need people like the guy doing the natron experiments to see, what is possible, what avenues could they have maybe taken. We need people like Terrence Howard, we need people like him to look through a completely different lens at the science that's already been established and see if they can find something new. So, whoo, buddy, I've been talking for a minute. What time is it? Oh, it's only been an hour. Wow. Okay. If anyone wants to call in, let me know. I will post the link. In fact, I think it's already copied. I can post it here. Bada bing. It's not pinned, but just click it. Click it, fellas. Give me a call. Yeah, I mean, there are the narrative, especially with archaeology, like I've talked about, it is shifting, it is moving. New groups are forming, new attitudes are forming. So like someone teaming up with the natives and going that route might be possible. That could be something that happens. It would be really cool. Yeah, Mr. Watson, I talked about that a lot in the earlier episodes. The power of architecture is not to be underestimated. The narrative or architecture, which is stronger, I don't even know. They might be tied. They're both just overwhelmingly powerful. Yeah, man. The Barabar Caves, I think they produce a lot of validity to the claims of Egyptian encoding information and other claims of encoding information. I think that, imagine if these were established as rain shelters. Imagine if these were established with rain shelters, as rain shelters. So part of the argument from Ben over at Uncharted X is that we have tens of thousands of these vases and this other, dishware that is essentially flawless in the hardest stones known to man. And there's tens of thousands of them. The schist disc right? The schist disc is one thing. It's like this incredible piece of art. It's this unique thing. If we found that, we find it's flawless, we go, holy crap, this is so impressive. That can be explained away, though. Artists are willing to put a lifetime of effort into making this one perfect thing that might not even have any practical use. It's just because they can, right? So the schist disc could be explained through that. But when you have tens of thousands of just dishware that follow that same unbelievable, flawless, imperfection, beautiful, exquisite nature, right? Um, Now you have everyday objects that are unreasonably impressive. So why do you go through the effort to make them? You're obviously not. You're not going through a lifetime of effort to make one object that impressive for an artistic endeavor. This is a commonplace, everyday kind of thing. You just have the ability to make things this impressive. Just like we do today, we can make stone vases as impressive, or at least close to, as those pretty easily. You throw a chunk of stone on a lathe and you get to turning, and you got this beautiful, exquisite, again, visually far more perfect. There's no waves in the light. If you shine a light on it, it glides perfectly over the surfaces because we have these high-tech modern lathes that spin very tightly with very tight tolerances at very high speeds, and you can make them look perfect and flawless, and we can pump them out quite easily. That's obviously what was going on back then. I actually agree with Ben in his argument about that. You don't pump out tens of thousands of these objects, unless you have the capability to do that. And so, just for a moment, entertain the idea that these caves genuinely were shelters from rain. Why are they so goddamn perfect, so complex, unless that was just an everyday kind of thing that they could do? It's no big deal. We make it to these tolerances because that's the tools that's what they do, right? And I mean, I made that point earlier. I was like, the perfection and symmetry that you see here is only explained by a tool that outputs perfect symmetry. I also, though, imagine that tool was likely developed for these caves. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just something they had. But we don't see, honestly, the temples of Indonesia, the temples of India. There's so many of them, and they are unbelievably impressive. So I'm not even going to try and make that argument that we don't see that elsewhere. And like the vases, these caves, the impressiveness of them was only evident very, very recently because we didn't have the technology to understand the level of precision, to understand the level of symmetry that they'd accomplished in these caves. Same with the vases. And this hasn't been applied to the rest of the world. We could find that this kind of precision is all over India. There's so much mind-blowing stuff in India. I wouldn't be surprised by that, actually. So that it might not have been made for these caves. That might have just been a tool that they had, that they utilized, and they were pumping this stuff out left and right. But it's a crazy thought to think these genuinely could have been just shelters from rain, and they're that perfect because that's what these people were working with. They were clearly working with something, right? I talked about the math. I talked about how impressive it is. I talked about how evident it is. If you look at the ratios, again, no number magic going on. It's distilled down to the most basic math equations that you could do: perimeter, volume, area, and it's distilled down to like the most basic numbers. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200, 300, 400, 5, right? And it's all perfectly done. So that is incredibly impressive, given that they're these strange shapes. They're not geometric shapes. A lot of math going into calculating that, a lot of precision going into executing that. None of this is accidental. It's all deliberate. It's all a smoking gun piece of evidence that these people were way more advanced than they're given credit for. So I think unless anyone wants to call in, I might wrap up. I covered everything I wanted to cover for the most part. I do have some other things to talk about. I might save those for later episodes. I might talk a little bit about geopolymer, but you guys are welcome to call in if you like. So geopolymer is another thing that I really don't like, just because there's a certain portion of the alternate history community that looks at literally anything and they go, geopolymer, concrete, that explains everything everywhere. You don't have to think about anything because it's just concrete. That means everything was easy and whatever, yada, yada. Like, it makes no sense. It definitely doesn't explain everything. The geopolymer granite, which in one of the videos I linked down below, there's a guy actually making geopolymer granite. It's pretty interesting because that's supposed to be impossible, but he's doing it. Now, does that mean that's what people were doing in the past? I don't know. Is it even practical the way he's doing it? He's in the early stages. He's made basically like chess pieces. He's not done anything big, so like the actual labor that would go into producing this geopolymer granite might be more labor than just carving this even with copper chisels kind of deal. So I don't know, but it's very interesting stuff. Even granite is possible to be made through geopolymers. There are people like Davidovitz that, insist the H blocks in Pumapunku are geopolymer, and he claims he has evidence. There's the Bosnian pyramid, which the guy down there claims that the outside is also geopolymer concrete that's superior to our modern concrete. Maybe it is. He claims to have had it tested at universities, and they, made these claims. I think a lot of times we genuinely don't know if we're looking at geopolymer or not, but there is a lot of evidence that the ancients did use concrete pretty widely, that they did use geopolymers pretty widely. It's found in Native American burial mounds going back thousands of years. It's found in Göbekli Tepe going back 10, 12,000 years. It's found, it's found all over the place. So despite the narrative being that Roman concrete was this major anomaly and it's, so impressive that they came up with it, the ancients were using concrete all over the world and geopolymers all over the world. And if you watch Primitive Technology, great channel, he's demonstrated several different recipes for geopolymers that are all very basic, like so basic that, of course, and obviously people would have discovered this multiple times over throughout the ancient past. And they're all very effective. And it's like, I think people were very curious, people were very creative, people were very connected to reality and their surroundings, and they understood them. I think they were doing all kinds of very impressive things that are just a totally different avenue and path than what we've gone down, and so hard for us to imagine. I talked about it earlier, but just to reinforce this silly notion of, it's essentially a meme. This idea that everything in the ancient past can be explained through the just time and labor, time and manpower. They didn't have smartphones back then, so they didn't have anything else to do. Every civilization just dedicated their entire population to banging on rocks from the time they woke up to the time they went to sleep, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year, plus leap year. They had nothing better to do. There was no entertainment. There was no curiosity or discovery or anything else. It was just purely people banging on rocks. So, of course, they built all of these magnificent structures. And even when we account Even when we make that insane, ridiculous claim that nobody had anything better to do than bang rocks together for their entire lives, it still fails to explain any of the impressive things we've seen. Mount Kailasa Temple, 15 years, I believe. The Great Pyramid, 15 years, I believe. The unfinished obelisk, I forget how many years. It doesn't matter. None of them add up. You take the experimental archaeology, you double the rate. You increase the population to whatever size you want, and you try and pack as many workers that you can physically fit into the area that you can, and you have them work 18 hours a day, every day of the week, year after year, and it still does not account for what we see. They were working with higher technology than what they've been ascribed. If you want to call that high technology, go right ahead. But this was in our recent past. By recent past, I mean the last several thousand years. Within the last 1,500 years, we have had high technology, or however the hell you want to refer to it as, people going down different avenues than we are today and doing things that are baffling us still today, like 91% survival rates for trepanning. These people were not primitive, they were not simple, they were not stupid, and all of this is being actively covered up and hidden in a global, worldwide conspiracy. And the vast majority of this is accomplished simply through controlling the narrative. But when they do need to step in, like in Gunung Padang, and you do have a government going, yeah, man, explore this. This is awesome. They shut them down and they go, oh, never mind. I met with some people and they enlightened me, and Prime Minister myself of Indonesia or Malaysia or wherever the hell this is, yeah, we're going to shut this down. No, I know I just said you have our full endorsement of financial and resources and everything, but yeah, you're not going to look into this whatsoever, and we're going to slander you too. So they do step in. They do take direct intervention when they need to, and they do so pretty blatantly. Jimmy, Bright Insight, lays this out. He's got the facts for you. Formscapes on his How Science Became Unscientific. He lays out the hard facts for you. Eric Weinstein, in the last 40 minutes of his interview with on Joe Rogan, he lays out many of the same facts that Formscapes does if you want to back it up with some more references, right? So new narrative is being established. I disagree with where the majority of the alternate history community is, that this is all explainable through an advanced civilization 12 plus thousand years ago. I think this was all much more recent. I think that makes it even more of a mystery, even more exciting, and even more possible that we actually could get real answers and real evidence because it is more recent. But, you know, the narrative is shifting. New narratives are being established. It's not just a rejection of the old narrative. It's establishing new narratives. That's starting to happen. We're starting to see it, and that's very exciting. Trump's still alive. Don't give up. Don't give in. Don't get too down. Don't get too depressed. You know, start working on shifting the narrative. We've seen the power of memes. They're powerful. One guy can come up with a meme. One guy can change the world. It's still possible. People have given up on the idea of heroes because we've been so beat down by the narrative. We've been so beat down by our architecture. But it's still possible. Don't lose hope. Don't lose sight. Know that it's possible. Know that you, a human, are capable of the same incredible feats that all of these people in the past were. All of this wonderful stuff we see in the past, it was done by wonderful humans like you. So tune in next week, fellas. I hope you enjoyed the show. And God bless Trump. God bless America. God bless the new narrative. And I'll catch you next week. Peace out.